So for the last several years in my photography journey, I've been wanting something that really simplifies the process of photography. Removes all the extra fluff, all the extra clutter, all the extra features, all the extra settings and capabilities, and really just forces me to go back to the basics with photography. And recently, I had an opportunity to do just that. My wife and I are visiting the in-laws for Christmas, and the other evening, my father-in-law gave me an old camera that he had and hadn't used. It was this one, a Canon 20D. This camera was released in 2004, which would make it almost 20 years old. It's got an 8.2 megapixel sensor, is built like an absolute beast, EF mount, and is very, very basic and bare bones. And I've been using it quite a bit, actually, over the last couple of days. And I think I really found something that does exactly what I want, something that just simplifies the art and practice of photography down to the basics, gives you only the tools you need to make an image, and says, okay, now go out and actually make something. So for a little bit of context, I've been a professional photographer for the last 5 years at this point, going on 6. And while I have definitely enjoyed the things that new and modern cameras have come packed with, all the crazy features, like real-time eye tracking, autofocus, and crazy high dynamic range, more resolution than honestly anybody actually needs, I've often found that having that can really clutter the experience of just going out and making an image. So let's talk a little bit about this camera. When this thing released, it was the bee's knees. This thing used to be around $1,500 when it was released, and now you can pick it up for $30, $40, $50, sometimes less, depending on where you look for it. I've really found myself loving this thing through using it the last couple of days, because it removes all the fluff of photography. You get shutter speed, aperture, ISO. Your ISO is limited. It doesn't go any higher than 1600. Low light performance on these is not exactly the greatest, but I've had a lot of fun. It's really brought back a good challenge. And so it's just been great to use something that forces me to get back to the basics, because now I get a real clear idea of how good I actually am as a photographer, because I don't have any crutches to lean on. As I said, it's very bare bones. You have autofocus that takes 3 to 5 business days to lock onto anything, so you're better off using manual focus, if I'm perfectly honest. ISO that's limited up to 1600. The battery life of this thing, since it's so bare bones and basic, there's not a lot in this camera to drain the battery. I've been using it for the last 3 days. I've left it on. I left it on overnight the other night, and it's still at full battery right now, which is crazy. Like, the battery life on this thing just lasts forever, and it's built like an absolute tank. After using this, my R6 Mark II feels like a toy. As far as handling goes, it's honestly a joy to use. The shutter button can be a little bit spongy. You gotta push it a little bit harder than you think you do, but all of your dials and controls are nice and clicky, very, very responsive. Everything does exactly what you think it does because it's labeled. The camera really does just get out of your way. You don't have to think, oh, how do I do a certain thing? You just hit a button or two that does the thing, and there you go. Aperture adjustments are easy. Shutter speed adjustments are easy. The only one that's mildly annoying is you have to push the ISO button on the top of the camera and then move the wheel to change the ISO. Because it's so bare bones, it gets out of your way, and I love it for that reason. File handling, the JPEGs straight out of camera look fantastic. All of the black and white images you see in this video are straight out of camera, zero edits, black and white JPEGs coming off of this sensor, even the low light ones. And I think, honestly, this makes a fantastic black and white camera. It's incredible. But the raw files are awesome too. Like, the color is lovely. The grain feels rather organic, which was a surprise. The images are surprisingly sharp, given the fact that this is an 8.2 megapixel sensor. That's 8.2 million pixels in your image. That's it. Sharpness has been surprisingly good. I've been running around with an old Canon EF 50mm 1.4, and honestly, I've been quite surprised at how sharp the images are coming out. The dynamic range is obviously limited, coming out of a nearly 20-year-old sensor. It's not going to be as good as what we have in modern sensors now, but I've been pleasantly surprised. As with most Canon cameras, the vast majority of the dynamic range seems to be in the shadows rather than the highlights, which has been a bit of a learning curve, but restoring shadows in a Canon camera has been an absolute joy, even with the R6 II, and I found the same to be true with this camera as well, which was honestly a surprise given how old the sensor is, but I'd say the dynamic range, though definitely limited compared to modern cameras, is still more than usable. Color. I really don't need to say too much about color. It's an older Canon CMOS sensor. That's basically all you need to know. They have fantastic colors. I don't know what Canon did to their older sensors, but the colors coming off this thing are magic, and I really enjoy them a lot. Let's talk low light performance. Now, you're probably thinking, Paul, this sensor is almost 20 years old. It's an APS-C sized sensor, so it's already small, and the ISO doesn't go very high. So your low light performance is going to suck. And that's true, but also not true at the same time. Shooting with this camera, especially in low light, has really made me actually pay a lot more attention to light and shadow and where the lighting is in my scene. What the light is hitting, where the light is at, how bright it is, and really been able to work the scene based on the lighting to get something that's good. And it's been a very satisfying experience to do. To be perfectly honest, I think I've shot some of my favorite photos of my career in the last couple of days on this camera, which is crazy to say. I'm really loving the images that are coming out of this thing. They feel real and organic. I've had so much fun shooting with this thing over the last couple of days that, honestly, I would find myself shooting with it and posting images that I shoot with this a lot, simply because of how fun it is to shoot. It's been so long since I've had a camera that really feels like it actually properly gets out of your way, because there is no other option. You don't have to turn off a bunch of settings because they're annoying you and you don't use them. It doesn't even have those features. You get shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and color or black and white. And that's basically it. Shooting with an older camera really gives you an opportunity to look at your own work and say, how good am I actually? And that is something that I've really missed. I feel like I've improved as a photographer just in the last couple of days shooting with this thing. And I'm going to continue doing that. And that's why I think everyone who's a photographer should pick up an older camera. They're crazy cheap nowadays, and honestly, they're every bit worth it. So, would highly recommend this one. If you want to see how good you are as a photographer, pick up one of these. They're cheap, they're awesome, and I love it. And I'm pretty sure you will too. As always, thanks for watching. My name is Paul. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.